People warned me before I took this job that it couldn't be done, that the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division was the last bastion of the left, that people had been there for decades, burrowed in, that we could never change it. All we could possibly hope to do would be to come there and perhaps slow down the bad temporarily. Well, I'm here to tell you that President Trump and his team have flipped the script at the Department of Justice. Today is the left that is on the run, confused and wondering how they're going to cope. Today it is the conservatives, the people who believe in the Constitution, who are in charge and who are advancing every day at the DOJ. And I'm so proud to work with all the lawyers who came, particularly the lawyers who came at the political level, left their comfortable homes, their law firm partnerships, their families, their comfort really, to come to Washington, to the swamp, to make these changes. And we are winning. And so I'm going to tell you about that. And so I just want to invite you to give a round of applause to the DOJ lawyers here who are fighting for all of you. There's some of them here in the front. People love to hate lawyers, but if you see a lawyer, a DOJ lawyer here, they all need a hug, okay? So the road here has not been easy for any of us, those of you on the outside or those of us inside the government. We've all lived through years of the coordinated obstruction of justice, the ideological capture of all of our institutions, and the lawfare waged by an elite, powerful, and well-funded group of woke extremists. In just my small corner of the government for which I'm responsible, I've seen universities not only fail to protect students from assault, threat, and harassment by mob activists, but design illegal DEI cartels to prevent certain students from ever setting foot on our American campuses and preventing qualified professors from even getting hired. In the olden days, we used to be worried about them getting tenure. Forget about that. They don't even get through the front door today. And this is true even after the succession of great Supreme Court verdicts that we've had recently on these issues. State and local governments have imposed hiring and promotion quotas based on race and sex, hearkening back to a dark time in our history, and yet calling it progress. It's 2025, people. It is not the time for these quotas anymore. Schools are letting men unfairly take little girls' trophies, steal their dreams, their opportunities at scholarships, their opportunities at leadership and at self-confidence. And we're letting them do it throughout the country. Activists and their lawyers twisted tools designed to prevent discrimination into weapons to install partisan electoral schemes to permanently seize control of many states in the United States, like my former home state of California. And legal institutions, legal counsel for these institutions, instead of sounding alarms, wrote the manuals on how to do all of this chicanery legally. At every turn, the road to once again applying our laws as written has been met with resistance and hostility. When I was sworn into the role of Assistant Attorney General by Attorney General Pam Bondi in April, decades of ideological rot in this institution had hollowed out the very entity entrusted to uphold our federal civil rights laws. For years, the DOJ treated our extensive constitutional and federal civil rights edifice as mere suggestions, selectively enforcing their provisions to advance the political agenda of nameless, faceless bureaucrats and partisans. Under the leadership of President Trump and Pam Bondi, the era of selective justice and political favoritism is over. In our first 100 days in office, the results speak for themselves. We obtained hundreds of millions of dollars of settlements, sued states and other jurisdictions, and put other jurisdictions on notice for violating the rights of American citizens, doing things that no other Republican administration, including the first Trump administration, successfully was able to do. I have one question for all of you. Are you tired of winning yet? I'm glad to hear that because there is so much winning yet to come. Now, let me tell you what I encountered just as I walked into the door of the Civil Rights Division. You go through this grueling process. For months, you can't comment on social media, and those of you who follow me on X know that that was probably the worst punishment that could have occurred. I had to bite my tongue on crazy thing after crazy thing. I had to disclose everything I ever owned and did. I had to put my colleagues through a lot of examination and scrutiny. I had to give up my beautiful home in California and move to the swamp. But it was all going to be worth it when I started work, right? So I walked into the DOJ, I got sworn in, I had to do, just like any of you in corporations, hours and hours of boring and silly, HR training that is still there at the DOJ. And then I sat down and I said, well, let me make sure that the 400 plus lawyers who work here know what's coming. So I sent memos out to the 11 sections telling them what each of their jobs was going to be. The first section was what the federal civil rights laws in question are. Maybe in voting, it's the Voting Rights Act, the Help America Vote Act. In employment, it's Title VII. In education, it's Title IX, it's Title VI, and so forth. And then I said, within those laws, we have prosecutorial priorities. And I copied and pasted the president's executive orders that are relevant to those sections into those areas. And I told them these are our priorities. This simple step caused over 200 lawyers in the Civil Rights Division to tender their resignations. I was a little taken aback. I thought they would at least make an effort to try, but okay, if you don't want to do the job, there's the door. That is how it works in the private sector, and that is suddenly how it works in the United States government too. And then they did what DC does. So they started leaking information to the press. Those who were left behind or had tendered their resignation but hadn't left began hosting unhappy hours. There were collective work crying sessions. They made their displeasure known. But ultimately, they left. So thank you to all of those people who left. I thank them as a taxpayer because they weren't willing to do the job. And some of them, frankly, hadn't been doing the job for quite some time, as I learned when I then asked, please provide what work product you personally created over the last 6 months. That caused another several dozen of them to quit. The ones who were really recalcitrant and insistent on, not doing what was required of them, our priorities shifted, okay? Some of the areas were busier than others. A lot of people were in what's called special litigation, which is suing the government and forcing consent decrees on relatively harmless police departments. And we weren't going to be doing much of that in this administration. I will do some if it is appropriate, but that wasn't really our purpose. And so we had to reassign some people. And so, the demand was in a couple of sections. Mike Davis, you need to behave yourself now, okay. So we had a lot of demand in responding to Public Records Act requests. So the FOIA section was very busy, so we assigned quite a few lawyers to respond to the FOIA requests. And we also, in the Civil Rights Division, we're kind of the HR for different government agencies, and there's a section called the Complaint Adjudication section. So being customer service oriented, we assigned a lot of lawyers to work in the complaint adjudication section. And those were typically not very happy at having to do the highest demand jobs that were the most backlogged, by the way, coincidentally. So a lot of those folks quit as well. So we're kind of down 77% now. That sounds good, but the reality is we're going to be busier than ever in this administration because the affirmative agenda of President Trump in the civil rights, really more than half of his executive orders impinge on civil rights issues. And so we actually are now looking to hire people to do the work that is needed to make America great again. And so please keep that in mind as you listen to what I have to say here. we have not cleaned house quite a bit, and we're setting the stage to begin doing the work the way it was meant to be. But we also had to fight not only our bureaucrats, but the mainstream media as well. Some of the words used about my mild-mannered reforms in the Civil Rights Division included that we had radically upended civil rights, creating a bloodbath within the division, and declared a revenge tour against dissidents in the DOJ. I mean, fairly strong language for simply asking people to show up and do their jobs for their pretty cushy salaries. The DOJ writ large has also faced activist judges who, with the stroke of a pen, have issued nationwide injunctions and temporary restraining orders to block the work of the executive branch. Time and again now, I'm sure you've heard about this already today, but our lawyers are winning bigly, as the president might say, in the Supreme Court. And so that's not stopping judges. Every day, some woke judge, usually within this district, does something crazy, and then some other judges slap them down. So that's kind of the war of attrition that we're fighting here, and we do intend to outlast the people who are opposed. Now, what is the Civil Rights Division? Most conservatives don't pay attention to it. The Civil Rights Division was created in 1957 because the federal government, under pressure from the American people, could no longer look the other way when our fellow citizens were being discriminated against throughout the country, but in the South particularly. Could no longer look away while state and local governments, employers, and schools denied millions of Americans equal opportunity. But who was opposed to the work of the Civil Rights Division back in the day? Do we know? The same people who are opposed to what we're doing today. The exact same people. We have come full circle in our country. The Dixiecrats opposed the Civil Rights Division and its work, and it's the modern-day Dixiecrats today. It is the university presidents who might as well be draped in white robes and hoods, who are viciously denying our federal civil rights and equality. Those are strong words, but I mean that. I mean, Students for Fair Admissions was 2 years ago, and just about every American university is still discriminating against most of America. And that is shameful, and we're going to put a stop to it in this Civil Rights Division. The laws haven't changed. I did start out, when I put my headlines out there, hey guys, it's the same laws as 3 months ago, only we're gonna have little different enforcement priorities. The principles behind the creation of those laws didn't change either. These are great laws, and when I testified in my confirmation hearing, I told the Senate I believe in these laws, and I really do. I've spent most of my career enforcing our federal civil rights laws. But what changed here in the DOJ was the courage, or the lack thereof, of the people tasked to enforce those laws. Going back many years, conservative administrations have allowed illegal DEI cartels to flourish on our campuses, discriminating against unfavored groups, and picking winners and losers based on race and sex. This is profoundly un-American when I say it, but we all know this has been our way of life in our country for decades. General counsel after general counsel at major universities downplayed the risks to their boards about what they were doing. Universities allowed other students to stand up and block students from getting to their classes. This happened all over America in high and low places. And look at the employers. We've created a culture in the United States where state and local governments, universities, and corporations created blatant quotas, sometimes out of ideology and sometimes just to comply with their perception of the law. Companies across the country have unfairly tipped the scales to hire foreign nationals over American workers. And this has become a culture of lying and deceit. And this is preventing Americans in agriculture, and whether it's agriculture or technological fields, from their equal opportunity. Our schools, K through 12, allowed radical gender ideology to infiltrate classrooms and athletics. And hospitals have recklessly engaged in the butchery of American children under our very noses in the name of so-called gender-affirming care. Now, in my private practice, I fought all of these things. And people thought I was crazy doing it from San Francisco. But guess what? 1 or 2 people standing up can create a movement. And when I started that process at my law firm, there were half a dozen of us. And by the time I left, we had more than quadrupled in size because so many lawyers in America realized that you can actually make a living doing good in our country. And so I want to thank all the brave nonprofit lawyers here who have mentored their colleagues. Some of them are taking me to task as I was walking in here for stealing their best talent. I'm sorry, but I'll give them back when we're done. But we're just getting started. After 5 months on the job, with all the amazing patriots who've come to join the way with us, the surge of lawsuits that you are now seeing coming from the Department of Justice is a bed that universities and employers have made for themselves. The Civil Rights Division, sometimes I call us the plaintiffs' lawyers section, the despised plaintiffs' lawyers, but we're the good plaintiffs' lawyers. But another analogy is we are the president's shock troops. We're the front guard. We are going to go first and clear the way for others to do their work. And we just need to win a few of these cases. I've already seen, I started with Columbia and a couple of other schools. My phone is ringing off the hook all day with university presidents doing let's make a deal. So help is coming soon. On the H-1B front, the power of the internet. Late last week before the holiday weekend, Labor Day after all, I thought it would be kind of cute to say, hey guys, we're enforcing our federal employment laws. That includes in the Civil Rights Division a law that penalizes employers for putting foreign workers over American workers. And I invited people to apply to a link. And I thought, this is weekend, no one's paying attention, people are getting ready for football. There were almost 100 new complaints over the weekend, which in our department is massive. And did I mention that we're hiring? We're really going to need help to actually process all of the people who are complaining. And it's about time. Can you imagine the number of Republican administrations who did not enforce those laws? Guess what? People on both sides were benefiting from the cheap labor that left American workers out in the cold. And we're not doing that any longer in this administration. Let me talk about election integrity for a minute. It's dear to my heart. I've been one of the president's lawyers for many years in election cases, and one of my partners is the White House counsel who led the president's election effort. The Civil Rights Division is returning voting rights enforcement to the basic premise of one man or woman and one vote. Our goal is to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. And I agree with President Trump that the biggest scam in voting is the unverified use of mail-in balloting. Now, the left will try to tell you that what we're trying to do is prevent service members from voting, but as usual, this is a foul lie. We are empowering and preserving our military's fundamental right to vote. And we are preserving that for all Americans. The left went nuts in July when I sent a 2-page letter to Texas pointing out that 4 of their congressional districts were illegally racially gerrymandered in violation of recent precedent in the Fifth Circuit. They even tried to subpoena me down to Texas to testify about this, unsuccessfully. Yet, think about that butterfly effect. Weeks later, the United States Supreme Court took up the case, Calais, on this very issue and has asked for additional briefing on the interpretation of the Voting Rights Act and whether it requires or even permits this type of racial gerrymandering. That case is going to be argued before the Supreme Court on October 15th, so watch that case closely. If it goes the way that the court has been hinting, it could radically alter our electoral politics in this country, for both sides. It's hard to believe that I have to say this in 2025, but American citizens have the right to have their vote counted equally and only with other American citizens one time in every federal election. And we are going to make it so by the end of this term. We are committed to changing law enforcement accountability It used to be the case that the DOJ would begin opening up an investigation of police practices and punish an entire community for decades sometimes over the mistakes of one or two bad cops. This is clearly a flawed model. It has cost every jurisdiction that has done it in recent years tens of millions of dollars of expense and a spike in crime. So not only are we not making people safer, we are making the taxpayers pay for someone else's sins. This is silly. And in my first few weeks in office, we dismissed 2 court cases involving consent decrees and permanently closed 10 other investigations plus. And so today, we are in a situation where we're not in that business anymore. If somehow it happens, we will definitely open an investigation, but we're going to stop harassing the cops and we're going to enable them to do their jobs. And that's really important. I'm a taxpayer here in DC, and I can tell you that the zeal with which we've seen cops zipping around town, excited to be free from the shackles of the silly rules that tied them up, is refreshing. Nobody wants to go into being a cop, to sit in a chair and do paperwork every time, something happens. And so we're really freeing them, and I think it's really refreshing. I feel safer in DC. I don't know if any of you do as well, but I think it's great, and I appreciate the president's leadership on this issue, and Jeanine Pirro and our other friends at the DOJ. Before I conclude, let me talk about equal opportunity in sports. My first lawsuit that I was sued in here in the DOJ was when California sued me and the Attorney General because I sent a 2-page letter, one of those nice little 2-page letters asking them to kindly stop letting boys take girls' trophies in K through 12. Simple, right? Well, Gavin Newsom and his team feel so strongly that women should play second fiddle to men that he went to court to try to stop us from doing what we're doing. But we have not stopped. In fact, we filed our own lawsuit weeks later in a different court. And so now we're in dueling jurisdictions, and we're really confident that our position is going to prevail because the United States Supreme Court has spoken on the issue of whether trans identification is entitled to a strict scrutiny review. I think those of you who are lawyers know there are clear signaling on this, and I think it's only a matter of time before the court agrees with us on this. So we sued California, a state with $44.3 billion in federal education funding, and they're putting all of that at risk by taking this extreme radical position on this one issue. When the largest and most populous state in the country openly violates our federal civil rights laws, we have not only the authority, but the absolute moral duty to act, and we have. And California will not be the last if other states follow down this path. As you can see, this is not your grandfather's DOJ. We are not waiting behind closed doors for lawsuits to land. I'm scouting them every morning before I even get out of bed on X. Thank you. Perhaps some would say undignified of me, but that's actually where the news is made today. And I learn about things much earlier than waiting for the nightly news. That is my grandpa's media, quite frankly. So my mom will send me things that she saw on Fox News, and I'm like, sorry, Mom. I already filed a lawsuit over that. But that's cute. We're taking leads online. We're actually talking to citizens who reach out to us. We're reporting back directly to the American people in daily and weekly X reports, short videos that we're doing to communicate with the American people. And I don't think you've ever seen that level of transparency from your federal government. I'm really proud to be part of that. We are a modern DOJ, and we're doing this with a very lean team. Over 70% of my team has quit, and more than half of the rest aren't really down with the program, to be frank, although we do have a lot of great career people who are very professional, and we're grateful for them doing their jobs. But my entire team is working tirelessly to ensure that our federal civil rights laws are enforced fairly and equally for each and every American. Not certain categories of Americans, not favored people, not whoever happens to be in vogue, but all Americans. Our laws were created to serve the common good of the American people. The common good was referred to as the general welfare, the public good or the public interest. But this good is ingrained into our American legal landscape. Our founding fathers echoed this concept in the preamble to the supreme law of the land. stating that the Constitution's purpose is to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Not just for some Americans, but for all Americans. That's what we are fighting to reclaim. Not just a set of restrictions for bad actors, but the guardpost and the guidepost of how we, the American people, want to live in a civilized society. Our legal tradition, with its due process, good faith, and enacted reason, offers a thorough methodology as well as a historically grounded basis for why the American people and her law have developed over time, and why the rest of the world seeks to imitate our freedom and our liberty. This Department of Justice is on a mission, not of destruction, but of restoration of these lofty constitutional principles that we all learned in school and so many of us have been forced to forget along the way. Our opponents are wailing and gnashing their teeth every day, and it's a beautiful thing to see. I have a mug on my desk that one of my colleagues gave me that says, "The tears of my enemy," and I drink from that mug with relish every day. Another mug that I have, it has the letters FAFO, and those of you who follow me on social media know what that means. I know there are quite a few people of the cloth here, so I will not spell that out. I don't want to be struck down. So when the next group of elites comes to demand we stop protecting fairness in hiring, confidence in our elections, safety in girls' sports, we're going to answer them the same way that Leonidas answered on the eve of the Battle of Thermopylae. Molon labe. Come and take it. Thank you.